Well, it's a great pleasure to be here at the BCNA in my own electorate with Kirsten and with her wonderfully committed staff. This is a tremendous organisation, an organisation with hundreds, indeed thousands of volunteers and supporters, as well as their dedicated staff. And during COVID, JobKeeper came to the rescue, like it did for so many other not-for-profits across the community. 35 staff were supported by JobKeeper. And talking to the staff, they worked from home even as the lockdown continued, and they didn't miss one of the 13,000 calls that were received last year from mothers, from wives, from sisters, from daughters, from husbands, indeed from people across the community who just wanted some advice, some more information to help them navigate through a difficult time. JobKeeper supported not just small businesses and larger businesses, but also an enormous number of not-for-profits across the community. Nearly $8 billion in phase one of JobKeeper went to the not-for-profit sector. More than 10% of payments went for the not-for-profit sector. So it was an enormous commitment by the Morrison government to support these organisations. Now, JobKeeper is coming to an end today, having met its objectives of saving lives and saving livelihoods. It's been a remarkable program. When we first announced it on the 30th of March last year, Australia was staring into an economic abyss. Treasury feared unemployment reaching as high as 15%. That's more than 2 million of our fellow Australians would have been unemployed. They also feared more than 20% fall in economic growth. And we all remember those really confronting images of tens of thousands of our fellow Australians lining up outside Centrelink, having lost their jobs, and indeed there were hundreds of thousands, millions of more Australians who were actually fearful of their own job security. And JobKeeper came to the rescue. It was an economic lifeline when Australia needed it most. 3.8 million Australians were supported by JobKeeper at its peak, and around 1 million businesses and many not-for-profits. Now, the vast majority of recipients of JobKeeper have now graduated. 2.8 million have graduated, more than 650,000 businesses have graduated off JobKeeper. But it continues to be tough for many across the sector and across the regions in Australia. So as JobKeeper comes to an end, the Morrison government's economic support continues. We have introduced a number of targeted programs. Recently, a tourism and aviation package of $1.2 billion to get more planes in the air and more tourists on the ground, as well as cheap loans, up to 2 years of repayment-free loans that could go and support a business that backs itself to get to the other side of this pandemic. Last week, we announced a new package of support for the arts and entertainment sector with $135 million in grants, as well as support for those who are in particular financial hardship. And we have the broader economic support measures that are going to help boost the economy to get to the other side of this pandemic, including the tax cuts, infrastructure spending, more than 300,000 new training places, as well as very significant support for businesses to invest in machinery, equipment and other things that will help keep their business growing into the future. And we know that Australians have also accumulated some $240 billion on their balance sheets, both household balance sheets and business balance sheets, that was not there this time last year. That's money that will continue to be spent across the economy, supporting jobs and creating new jobs. So, Kirsten, it's a real pleasure to be here with you. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Australia has performed on both the health and the economic front better than any other country around the world. The real heroes are those on the front line who have provided the health support to people who needed it most, but as well as people in workplaces right around the country, including here at the BCNA, where they've provided valuable support to the people who needed it, even when the state and indeed parts of the country were in lockdown. So thank you very much. Are there any questions in relation to JobKeeper matters? Because then I'll ask Kirsten after that to leave if there are other matters.
You've called JobKeeper a lifeline, and indeed it was, but now that it's set to come to an end, are you expecting a wave of business insolvencies, particularly for small and medium firms?
Well, there's no doubt that there will be some businesses that will continue to do it tough once JobKeeper ends. But as a program, it was always a temporary one. It was always an emergency support program. Indeed, we heard from the Treasury Secretary just last week to the Parliament that JobKeeper needs to end because the program has some characteristics in it that would have adverse consequences for the economy if it was left in place as the economy strengthens. In particular, hampering mobility of workers to other roles across the economy. But our support continues. Our support continues through targeted programs like the tourism and aviation program, like the arts program, like the cheap loans that are available more broadly across the economy. And we'll continue in this year's budget to make further announcements that support economic activity. As a program, it has to come to an end, but our other supports continue across the economy. The other thing to say is the labour market's proven to be a lot more resilient than even our most optimistic forecasts from the Reserve Bank and from Treasury. As I said, there was at one point Treasury feared unemployment to reach as high as 15%. Today it's at 5.8%.
Those programs, though, Treasurer, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people, as predicted, that could lose their jobs as of JobKeeper ending. They might not have the money to tap into a tourism program or those initiatives that you've taken on. What do you say to those people watching tonight who are on the cusp of losing their jobs when this ends?
Well, there are a lot of people and a lot of sectors across the economy and regions that are continuing to do it tough. And just as the Morrison government had their back at the start of the crisis, through this crisis, we'll have their back right to the end of this crisis.
In what way, though?
Well, the economic support that we're providing is going to help boost economic activity. And more economic activity means more people walking through the shop front door. It means more people buying a motor vehicle or building a home. It means more people jumping on a plane for a holiday. All of those activities help generate jobs in related sectors across the economy. Take tourism, for example. I was recently in Cairns. Cairns is one of those areas that's been hit hard by the international border closures and the domestic border closures. The support that we're providing with the half-price airfares into Cairns will see more tourists go into those areas. With tourism as well, Alan Joyce said to me that in the month of January, he cancelled 1,500 flights into Queensland alone. That's flights into Hamilton Island, that's flights into Maroochydore, that's flights into Brisbane, that's flights into the Gold Coast because of those border closures. With the vaccine rollout, which is going to really help the economic recovery as well, I think you'll see a lot more certainty and a lot more stability, and hopefully we can avoid some of those snap border closures which end up costing jobs. So I'm optimistic about Australia's economic future. We've certainly as a country outperformed other nations around the world, but there is a long way to go.
With respect, though, optimism is great, but it's not direct money in someone's pocket, is it? We can't guarantee those 150 or 200,000 people are going to have money coming in to put food on the table,
well,
can we?
There is a lot of support, money that is flowing now every day into the pockets of households and into to the balance sheets of businesses to drive economic activity, to create those very jobs that you're talking about. And even with the end of JobKeeper, it is Treasury's advice and the Reserve Bank of Australia's analysis that the unemployment rate will continue to trend down over time. You see, we can't keep spending borrowed money forever. And this is a program which was always temporary. It was initially for 6 months. We extended it for another 6 months. It has to come to an end, but there are other programs that are in place. Any other questions on JobKeeper? Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Other questions on other matters?
Are you aware of the new listings to the PBS today? I know it might not necessarily
Kirsten was just meant you can Kirsten was just about
before we let Kirsten go.
That's all right. Yeah, she was just talking about taking a call from Lynn Swinford, who is the founder of BCNA, about that new listing.
Thank you, Kirsten. Before we let you go, there are new listings to the PBS today. How are they going to change survival rates for those with breast cancer?
BCNA is so very grateful that yet again we have a new listing for women and men living with metastatic disease. We estimate that this will reduce the cost for an individual by more than $50,000 to have access to the very best treatment. What we don't want is a two-tiered healthcare system where the people with money get access and people without don't. And this today is just another step forward, and we're very happy that this is a drug we've been trying to get onto the PBS for a long time, that we've got success today, because that means that women and men from breast cancer will be able to have the very best treatment every time.
Does it have the potential to save lives as well?
This particular drug is for women and men living with metastatic disease, so it is a terminal illness for them, but we know that it will give them months and in fact years to be there for the families' weddings and other celebrations. So it's a really great day for women and men across Australia.
Can I just add to that? The PBS is a national treasure. We have been listing the drugs that have been advised to us to list without fail. And when we talk about having a strong economy, that is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end, and that end is to provide the support to those who need it most across the community. So our ability to list drugs on the PBS, or to provide the health and education funding, or indeed to respond to a pandemic as we have with an unprecedented $251 billion of economic support, is only made possible because we have a strong economy, and so that's a direct result of that.
Thank you.
Treasurer Andrew Laming, I don't know if you saw what came about last night with him appearing to make light of the situation he's now in via social media. The Morrison government must be extremely concerned about his position now, and would you think it's time for him to resign?
Well, the Prime Minister spoke to Andrew yesterday and made it very clear what was expected of our MPs, and Andrew has reflected on that conversation with the Prime Minister. And following that conversation with the Prime Minister, he has decided not to recontest the next election.
This is going to put your government in a very tricky situation, is it not?
Well, Andrew is not recontesting the next election, so the LNP will find a new candidate, and that will be up to the pre-selectors. Andrew is also taking some time to seek some additional support. That's important, given his behaviour has been unacceptable.
Should he be kicked out of Parliament now?
No. He was elected by representatives of and the constituents of his community to support them in the Parliament to affect policies that advance their interests. That is what the coalition does. He's going to take some time to have this additional support and various sessions that he's going to be engaged in, and then he will return to the Parliament in the budget week.
Is he a fit and proper person to be an MP?
I understand he is. That's my view. As for him sitting into the LNP or the coalition party room, that will be a decision for the LNP itself. But I think he's taken the proper course of action here to seek that counselling, and then obviously following that conversation with the Prime Minister, not to stand again at the next election.
Treasurer, you say it's your view he's a fit and proper person. It's documented that he has done to women, including the photograph, would prove to half of the voting population he is not a fit and proper person to be an MP. And he's made light of it now.
Well, his behaviour has been absolutely unacceptable.
So how is he fit and proper then?
Well, because he continues to serve his constituents in the Parliament. No doubt there will be others who hold a different view, but his decision not to recontest the next election means that the voters in his electorate get an opportunity to have a fresh start with a new coalition, a new LNP candidate.
Treasurer, would you support moves to limit sitting and drinking hours to improve culture at Parliament House, as suggested by some Liberal backbenchers this morning?
Well, these are all issues that should be on the table, and these are issues that the Jenkins review, which reaches across the political divide, will no doubt canvass and will make recommendations. The Parliament is an unusual working place. It's had long hours. It's particularly intense, and we have very important work to undertake. But the behaviour and the conduct and the culture that we have seen exhibited by revelations of what has taken place in the Parliament. We've seen those revelations in recent weeks. Falls well below community standards, and it has to change, and it has to change fast.
What do you think the Prime Minister might need to do to perhaps win back the trust of female voters?
Well, again, the Prime Minister was very upfront in his press conference last week about the challenges that women face across the community. These issues are much bigger than those that have surrounded Christian Porter and Linda Reynolds. These issues go to the way women are respected in the workplace and indeed treated in the home and on the street. And these are issues that we are all determined to change, not just in the Parliament, but more broadly across the community. We have the Respect at Work recommendations. The government is working through its response. That's a substantial piece of work. There are other issues that we are seeking to advance, but it's not just action. It's also the ability to listen and to understand and to hear the concerns of women right across the country.
Treasurer, I don't want to labour the point, but you've said he's a fit and proper person to continue in his role. Then on the other hand, we're talking about respecting women and women voters. The women in his electorate will not be feeling respected right now. Is it not insulting to them to say, we're going to keep him in the role, he should stay in the role, he's a respectable guy? I mean, really?
Well, his behaviour was insulting. His behaviour was
So why should he not step down right now?
Well, because he was elected by his constituents.
Who weren't aware of his behaviour then?
But they elected him, and they elected him for a 3-year term. Now, he will continue to serve in the Parliament, but he has made the decision not to contest the next election. He's also provided an apology, and he's also going to go through the counselling and the other
which he's made a joke of since.
Well, they're important measures. There'll be important things that he has to undertake here to change his behaviour and to obviously increase his awareness of the sensitivity of these matters. No one is understating the significance of what he did and how disrespectful and how unacceptable that behaviour is. He has decided not to participate in the pre-selection for his seat at the next election, and the Prime Minister and I welcome that.
Can you see how
Last
there's
question.
some irony in you saying that we need to take fast action to improve the culture around Parliament House, yet taking no action and Andrew Laming gets to keep his position?
I think it's a pretty big step for somebody who's been in the Parliament for some time and obviously very much enjoys his role and is committed to his community. I think it's a pretty big step for him to decide not to contest the next election. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.